Now look, what do you say to someone who says when you say Bitcoin is safer, it says, well, how can you actually say that
Yeah.
Bitcoin is safe with its high level of volatility and its short lifespan, only being in existence 14 years? What would you say to someone who came to you with uh, with comments like that?
Yeah, that's one of the things I say on Twitter a lot and on podcasts a lot. And, some people like to make fun of that because they're like, oh, how's your Bitcoin doing? It's down, 60%, whatever. And
Mhm.
I understand why people say that. And that's partially why I say that, because I know people's brains, thinking in the old worldview,
Yes,
perceive it that way. They perceive volatility as inherently risk. And that's true, that volatility is a part of risk. But another component of risk that human brains aren't good at pricing, because we're very good at watching a number on a screen go up and down. Our brains like that.
yes,
But what our brains are not good at is we're not good at defining and understanding technological risk. So for example, I was born in the year 1999. If we were to go back in time to the year 1999 or 2000 or so, and I were to ask you, what is the single lowest risk long term, like 10, 20, 30-year investment in 1999, theoretical or not, the obvious answer to me would have been bandwidth of the internet. So let's say the
interesting.
internet in 1999, let's say all the bandwidth of the internet in 1999 from then on was divided into 21 million units of bandwidth. Um, to me, that's the lowest risk thing, because in the 80s and
Sure.
90s and all that, there are all these attempts of the internet. I forget all the companies that tried to create the internet, but there were many companies that tried to make the internet. And of course, the decentralized TCP/IP protocol is the one that survived. And so by the late 90s, even though 95% of the world or 90% of the world was not using the internet yet, it was obvious which one was going to win. Of course, it's going to
That's
be the
right.
decentralized protocol of the internet, the TCP/IP protocol, and not all these other centralized internets that are 100 times or 1,000 or 10,000 times smaller. And the reason I say the internet was the lowest risk then, and yes, I know the tech bubble was right after that. The reason for that is because looking forward, one or two scenarios is going to happen. Either this little internet thing in 1999 is going to take off and humanity is going to technologically progress, or it's not, and humanity's going to fail, because it doesn't matter what internet companies come in the future, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Netflix, all those. It doesn't matter what companies survive, they're going to use the internet. And so looking
That's right.
forward, it's like, okay, well, assuming humanity survives and assuming that the global communications network that we call the internet survives, the lowest risk thing is the internet. Because if you don't own the internet and you own legacy institutions, your risk is that the internet displaces those business models. There is no business
That's
that
right.
has survived that adopted the internet. It's like, you could not buy this theoretical bandwidth of the internet in 1999 and instead buy, Radio Shack, Kodak, Sears, and Barnes and Noble stock, and think that you're well diversified, but it's like every business model that didn't adapt has died. And even the business models, even the businesses did survive, those business models had to change. So they were undergoing great risk. If you take, the companies that had to adapt, they had massive switching costs. And so
That's right.
in the
That's
same
right.
way today, basically Bitcoin is a bridge to the other side. And everything outside of Bitcoin is either going to die or have to undergo massive degrees of change. And you don't know which companies are going to change in time, and you don't know which companies are going to die. And I think most companies will make it through, because hopefully most companies are above average in intellect by
Mhm.
definition. But the reason I say Bitcoin's lowest risk is, number one, for that technological reason, that if this thing's the future, either humanity is going to survive or it's not going to survive. And
That's
if
right.
it's not going to survive, then forget Bitcoin, forget gold. It's like we're going back to um, global famine and starvation. If we have that degree of technological destruction. Or the other alternate is that this thing displaces everything else. And, if you don't own the displacing technology, you're going to be exposed to all that displacement and all that volatility.
That's
So
right.
that's one way to view it. The more simple way to view it, or the shorter explanation of that, is simply this: that either Bitcoin is the global monetary singularity or it isn't. And so if it's not, then it's going to be trading marginally above zero at some point in the future. It'll just crash down to zero or near zero, probably not quite to zero, but very close to zero. And it'll just trade there forever because it'll be useless. It'll be corrupted or hacked or something like that. That's a possibility. Bitcoiners don't like to admit that's a possibility, but it is technically a possibility. There's unknowns and
It's
knowns that
not
we
a
don't know.
it's not a zero possibility,
It's not a
right? So
zero.
right,
It's not a zero chance. It's extremely
chance. That's
low,
right. Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's a probability. But the other possibility is that it is a monetary singularity of the human race, and in that case, it eats all monetary premium of all of their assets on Earth. And so it's like, okay, what are the odds you think that Bitcoin survives? Well, I think the odds are above 51%. And if they're at 51% or above, then Bitcoin's lower risk than everything else.
Then that's
Because then
right. That's right.
because you have a
Yeah,
51% chance that everything else is going to zero, and then a 49% chance Bitcoin's going to zero. And so even if
that's right.
it's like that is the idea people don't understand yet, is that people view this as a speculation. You got to put it as a portion of your portfolio. You got to trade it in and out and all that. And people fail to realize that it's a engineering system like any other. It's either a closed system or an open system, like a lamp. It's either on or it's off. Bitcoin either works or it doesn't. Like there's no middle ground.
That's right.
And every percentage point probability you give to Bitcoin surviving is a percentage point probability you give to everything else trending towards zero forever. So the reason I say Bitcoin's low risk is because I believe there's a greater than 51% chance it's going to survive.
Right. I think that of course, I see great and deep similarities between the emergence of Bitcoin and the emergence of the internet. I saw the power of the internet. I was fortunate enough to see the power of the internet very early. I had my first website in 1994. And a lot of people actually don't
Wow.
realize that prior to that, it was illegal. The use of the internet, I believe, was illegal. And a lot of people aren't really quite aware of that. But I was actually struck, Luke, by your and many of your talks and some of your YouTube videos, your deep knowledge of history. And I've found that I've found two types of individuals that find I found that it seems like they have an easier path toward understanding Bitcoin. It's engineers and
Engineers.
those who have a very decent grasp of history. And I found that in you. Now,
Yeah.
um,
Exact same. I just want to say real quick, exact same. I've
yeah,
talked to hundreds of people, all kinds of professions, ages,
right.
nationalities. The two groups, historians and engineers, they get
That's
it.
right.
Finance
They
people
get
are clueless.
That's so
Yeah.
true. It's so true. Now, with that being said, the internet to me, I see a deep correlation between Bitcoin and the internet and the emergence of the internet and the emergence of Bitcoin. Is there anything else in history that you can correlate the emergence of Bitcoin and associate it with the emergence of a past technology or a past occurrence?
I mean, yeah, I think that was certain degrees of similarities. I think probably the most similar would be the electric grid, because they're all pretty much the same idea. The electric grid is a global network of physical energy, electricity, and
Yeah,
you have nodes of the electric grid being, coal or, coal plants or natural gas reservoirs, or, now today we have nuclear reactors, solar panel
yeah,
farms. So it's like, I think that's similar. I think another one that's similar is the internet, because you have the internet and then you have all your
of
routers and all
course.
that. Those are their nodes, and then you have Bitcoin with their nodes. So I think that's all very similar. I think the printing press, you can make certain analogies, because the printing
Yes,
press is just the free flowing of information, and you have nodes of the printing press network that are just local newspapers or bookmakers or manufacturers, or
right.
different printing presses. So I think that's possible too. But I mean, obviously, every single one's unique based on the technology before and the technology that it allows. But yeah, I think there's similarities between many.